Joining us now to talk about it is someone who's negotiated a lot for India and the WTO and other global forums, former Secretary Mr. Ajay Dua. Mr. Dua, good morning and thank you so much for taking the time out this morning. Where do you see this leading to? We've been talking about a global trade war and the possibilities thereof for some time now. This has been the first exchange of meaningful salvos to my mind in the last 3 odd months or so.
Absolutely right. So far, people thought that Mr. Trump was posturing and only threatening, but now, for whatever considerations, to me, they look as much political as economic. He started making good on his threats. And as we all know, he started with the metal industry, which had the locations in the U.S., that's the Rust Belt and the Great Lakes area. So he got support from them during his campaign, and he's also now looking forward to greater support in the midterm elections to the U.S. Congress due later in the year. So he started acting probably more because of political reasons than economic. And I say this because on grounds of economy, it doesn't make too much of sense what he started off. And I'm so sorry for sounding somewhat accusing, but the war has been started, or let's say the conflict has been started by the US, and it has all the potential of turning into a global war, a global trade war, which is not going to do anyone good, whether it's the US by itself, or the Chinese, or the European Union, or even India, about which also action has been taken. The 240 million is the impact which the Indian Commerce Ministry assessed of the increase in tariffs on 25% levy on steel and 10% on aluminium, which would occur to Indian exports. So India has notified the relevant body of the GATT and now the WTO that it intends imposing from the 21st of June, that's just 3 days down the line, duties on American products varying from 10 to 50%, 10% on things like, Apple, which we import a lot from the US, 20% on almonds, and going up to 50% on what is a bit of a red rag to President Trump, the Harley-Davidson motorbikes, that's motorbikes of engine capacity above 800 cc. I think having made good on his whatever he had been saying or he had promised during the election campaign, Mr. Trump would do well not to escalate it into a war. But right now, it's a smoldering trade dispute which can be handled, yes.
No, Mr. Dua, that's precisely my question. Based on your experience and your reading of how such situations have unfolded in the past or could unfold with the kind of men at the helm of the different countries right now, do you fear that this could escalate? Because China has retaliated immediately. Other countries have also voiced their unequivocal displeasure. India has had some action too. Does this have the simmerings of something that will escalate meaningfully over the course of the next 1 month?
Well, I hope not, though from what one understands, President Trump has already asked his USTR to go ahead and draw up a list of items worth $100 billion, which are today vis-a-vis China. But I think the US doesn't have that much of elbow room, considering that its trade with China is not its exports to China are only about $170 billion.
Right.
Of which they have acted on $50 billion already, or 34 billion acted, 16 billion, the list coming out, and going forward talking about $100 billion. If they really US is concerned, and I can see that the US is concerned about theft of intellectual property in China, which has over the years been rampant. US is also concerned about the way the Chinese built up their exports through currency manipulation. It needs to find, at least to the technology issue, another way out rather than trade, and checking on investments. The investments which US companies are making either in China directly or in exports from the US to China to become a part of the supply chain. That could perhaps be more effective, and that is something which the rest of the world, including its own allies like Germany, would go along with it, because everywhere the fear is that the Chinese have built up so far their manufacturing base on the basis of investments made elsewhere in the world in technology. China is benefiting from it. I would urge a route down the investment and technology route rather than on trade, which is not going to be fruitful in favor of the US for a variety of reasons. Because and it's going to hit the American consumers. Right now, the Chinese have been extremely smart. They've hit the rural base of President Trump by taxing agriculture products much more. They've also hit some of the metal industries, which I don't think can be revived. The US steel industry is almost moribund.
And there could be more and there could be more in store as well, sir.
I think the Chinese...
No, sir, I appreciate, but running slightly short of time, and which is why I just wanted to interrupt here. One quick question on where does all of this leave India? Because that's the moot, essence of this conversation right now, this morning. One small salvo fired by India, and I think if I'm not wrong, India and US are preparing to hold the first 2+2 talks in Washington on 6 July as well. So they're trying to keep the trade tensions from simmering and moving up to disrupt vital strategic talks as well. Where does this leave India and US?
I think the US will do well to accommodate some of the concerns of India, because trade also determines political relationships, and the US is right now building its bridges in Asia, including with India. And what have we done? Exactly, we are a small trade player for the US. US by itself is not a major trading economy. As we all know, 88% of its GDP is linked to domestic. It's barely 12%, of which the 46% trade deficit of $850 billion is vis-a-vis China. Why is the US taking on everybody in the world? European Union, India, all of which are now friendly allies of theirs, and the US as a big brother could easily, and I'm emphasizing the word big brother, go along building bridges with the rest of the world when it takes on China. And with China, please deal with them on what your 301 investigations have established, that the Chinese have been stealing your intellectual property over the years. You could do that. You could address all your political concerns as well as economic concerns of the US if this particular line of action is followed by the United States much more than in the past, than just going along the trade route.